It's a new book. It holds spiritual wisdom to find freedom and discover the true self. Who am I? What is my purpose? How do I find and pursue my heart's desire? Have you ever asked that of yourself? I can tell you I have. Find the answers to these questions within the pages of this easy-to-read and simple book we're going to be discussing today. If I lose the roles I play that stand in the way of finding my true self, what will become of me? What if I could see myself the way God sees me and allow others to see that authentic self? Kenny G. Down is the author. He addresses these questions and more in his profound and beautiful new book, The Mirror, the Window, and the Wall, The Life-Changing Power of Finding Your True Self. So I'd like to welcome Kenny G. Down to Nothing Like a Good Book. Welcome, Kenny.
Well, thank you so much, Mark, and what a beautiful introduction. Thanks for having me on the show.
You say, Kenny, that this book will help us discover the most important questions to ask ourselves. Elaborate on that for me.
Well, some of the most important questions were in your intro, the who am I and what am I, and to find our true selves. And so if we find those things that block us from our true selves, then we find that we can become a person that can pursue our heart's desire, because these things that block us, which I call the mirror, the window, and the wall, are what other people think of us, how we present ourselves into the world, and the walls that we build, and what we see when we look into the mirror, which is oftentimes not the truth.
So by following your simple laid out instructions, which we'll get to in the book, the reader can transform their view of the world and themselves. And I was surprised to read that it can come down to a 1-week exercise. That's going to be interesting, because people don't want long things today, do they?
They don't. And that was part of the reason that I wrote this book. I kept it short. You can read this entire booklet, or this novella, you might call it, in 25 or 30 minutes in one sitting. And my recommendation is that you do that every day for 1 week, considering these things that are brought up, these points that are brought up in the book, and how they apply to your own life. And as we do that, we begin to see these things in our lives that we want to change. And I think it's a dramatic shift. This book's been doing really, really well. I've heard from a lot of folks that have had great results doing that exercise. Just one day, every day for 1 week, read the book, do a little meditation on what it was you just read, and then write a paragraph or two on what comes to you from those thoughts.
Well, you write, Kenny, with intimate insight born of your own experiences, right?
Well, that's true. My own experience was that I came from a family that was in poverty and had alcoholism and drug addiction in the family. I became a drug addict myself. I became a drug addict who was homeless, and found recovery through the practice of some of these spiritual principles outlined in this book. And many years into doing that, what was really revealed to me is it boiled down to these 3 things. It boiled down to, how do I see myself when I look in the mirror? Am I seeing this true vision of myself, like the same vision that God would see of me? Or am I seeing what other people, all of these things that society places on us, these perceptions that we have of what it means to be successful, what it means to be good looking, what it means to have some of the things in our lives. And, that's the mirror. And when we get rid of so much of that false identification that is placed on us by society, and see our true selves, that's a spiritual awakening in and of itself. And it doesn't take a long time to begin to see that, when you realize what you're looking at, and this is a metaphorical mirror, of course, but what we're looking at, this view that we have ourselves, is not the truth, nor is it near the truth.
Well, this is not a religious book, but it is a spiritual awakening, perhaps. This spiritual awakening would set him free, allow him to live as his authentic self, and help many others on their journeys. This is Kenny G. Down. He's been sober for more than 30 years. He's still an active member of the recovery community, sponsoring new people, teaching meditation, mindfulness practices, and 12-step recovery workshops all around the country. Now, let me ask you this, Kenny. In your many years of helping others discover their true selves, what have you found?
Well, what I found was the ability to one, set aside this need that we have, to which I call the window, this need that we have to hold a window in front of ourselves and try to control what everybody sees, that we're only going to open the window slider just a little bit so people only hear what we want them to hear. They only see what we want them to see. And I found freedom from the need to present that to other people, and found that through doing that, I can pursue my heart's desire free of worrying about what other people think. The other thing that I've really found is the ability to recognize when I'm starting to put up walls and to build a wall between me and somebody else. It's impossible for me to build a relationship and to love another human being when I'm doing that. And so this ability that I've had to make a connection and try to live in this world that we live in, which is incredibly decisive, that we can be somebody who helps to bring about what I call the coming together time that I wrote a lot about in my last novel, the book Darko.
3 consistent dominating factors, right, that block their ability to realize their heart's desire and find the life that people, dream of living, right? You started by writing a short blog on this concept. This book is called, folks, The Mirror, the Window, and the Wall. Okay, now, the blog and the concept, which quickly became your most popular post at that time, then after several requests, you came forward asking that you expanded on the piece, right? So that henceforth we get the mirror, the window, and the wall. The life-changing power of finding your true self was born. Now, John Kelly from the Detroit Free Press gave you 5 stars on this, quoting, "There is spirituality and a sense of peace and healing throughout this enthralling book. This is the perfect book to read if you need a lift in life." I think we all do right now. And clarity about yourself. Because I think what COVID has done, and still not over yet, but I think it really has made a lot of people look at their mirror, the window, and the wall. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, absolutely. The COVID, I think, has helped people to realize some of the things that are important. And although COVID is a tragic thing, and we've had these, many, many thousands that have died of, millions that have died of this terrible virus. But I think when we're looking back on it, we're going to see that this was a turning point in our society, that people are, corporations, for instance, are going to have to get used to the fact that people want a quality of their life that they were willing to give up to drive, 40 minutes or an hour to work and work all day and drive 40. Now people want to work at home, and corporations are going to have to do that, or their people are going to leave. And so I think one of the things that's happened is people have looked at this mirror, at the window and the wall, and looked at these things and started getting some clarity there that, hey, what's really important in our lives? It's not how other people view us. It's not these elements of success that society places on us, that sometimes we accept roles that are assigned to us by other people. And when we do that, when we accept these roles and begin to play these roles, it's tiring. It's exhausting.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And people really realize that through this time that we've had in COVID.
You describe yourself as a spiritual seeker. What does that mean to you? I mean, how did you come to discover this as your identity?
I think the spiritual life found me more than I found the spiritual life. And that's a bit of an oxymoron, but I have always believed that there was something to be found in the spiritual life. I couldn't really accept all the tenets and the beliefs of any one certain religion. That was always difficult for me. So I kind of threw everything out because of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I really believe, Mark, that there are people who are born with this innate need to find a spiritual way of life or else. And what I mean by that is that people will be miserable. They'll be looking at this, they'll have this distorted view of themselves. They'll be trying to, if other people see this distorted view that we have of ourselves, they're not going to like us and we're going to be banished from the tribe. So we put up this window and we try to present to the other people some, stage character that we present. And when that starts falling apart and people begin to question us on that, then we build walls up. And so these are people that either we find, and I put myself in this. You asked about me personally, and
Mm-hmm.
and that I had an innate need, I believe, and maybe it was something I was born with, that I was going to find this spiritual way of life, or I was going to suffer the consequences. There was no way out. I tried to find the spirits, as they say, in drugs and alcohol. Some people find it in food and overeating,
Mm-hmm.
in sex and gambling and other things. But it's really all of these things, the short-lived satisfaction that we find from those things is a proxy for the real thing, which is the spiritual way of life, which is connecting, that there is a connectedness to all of us, that we are all one, that we are one with our Creator.
Mm-hmm.
And that may mean different things to different people, but that we're all connected, that we're part of a much bigger spiritual world than we are a limited physical world where it's, may the best man win and
Mm-hmm.
and the dog eat dog world, as they say.
Right. You've published several other books, including Awakened Giant, Sleeping Spirit, and Darko. Now, what are the consistent themes that resonate through your books, do you think? And how do these books connect to the mirror, the window, and the wall?
That's a great question. And these books, if you were to go to a bookstore and you were to look on a bookshelf and you were to look in the spirituality or self-help section,
Mm-hmm.
that's where you'd find my books. You probably wouldn't find them in the religious section, although you may. Some people put that kind of stuff in their religious sections, but that's the commonality that they all have. My writing style is designed so that you can read a story that is engaging and interesting and compelling, and it's a page turner that makes you want to keep turning the page and finds out what happens next.
Mm.
And as you're going through that process of being entertained, you're learning and having this spiritual experience along the way. So these books will make you laugh. They'll bring you to tears. One thing that they absolutely do is they cause you to have a pretty deep inner reflective experience as you're reading these books. So it's different than just a drama or an interesting story or a spy story or something like these are deeply spiritual books, and they're meant to be, this one in particular is meant to be read over and over, because each time you read it, I promise you that you'll find something new in the pages that you hadn't seen before,
Right.
even though it's a short book.
That often happens, doesn't it, if you go back over something that is designed and geared at you reading more than once and putting it on the shelf. Because you do dig out more, and you often see things from a totally different perspective as well.
That's right. This book in particular and my other books are designed to meet you wherever you are on this spiritual path. So a person that's just beginning and just to scratch the surface and interested in spirituality can read this, and they'll have an understanding, and they'll get moved, and they will have a life-changing experience. If they'll do the reading every day for 7 days, a week later, they're going to be quite a different person than they were when they started reading this book. And the same, if somebody who's been on the spiritual path for many, many years reads this book, they're going to see something that's at probably a different level or a higher level of consciousness than the person that's just beginning. But they're still going to have a deep and effective experience reading this book.
What are the biggest, people's biggest obstacles? Let me ask you that. What are people's biggest obstacles to seeing their true selves and sharing that authentic self with others?
The biggest obstacle is fear, without a doubt, that if I pursue my heart's desire rather than my corporate career, and I talk from experience in that, although I was homeless when I got sober, I found that once I was sober and I was free of this obsession to destroy myself with drugs and alcohol, and I was pursuing a spiritual way of life, I did very well in business, and I was happy doing that for a while. But in the end, and I had good success in the corporate world, in the end, I found myself still unsatisfied because it wasn't my heart's desire. So when you are able to pursue that, the fear that we have, the number one obstacle is fear. That what's going to happen if I get rid of all of these things that have been thrust on me by society, and some of them fairly are things that we put on ourselves. It's not all societal pressure. We put a lot of pressure, and some of us have a very negative view of ourselves. That if all that goes away, will I be able to be a successful author? That was mine. Would I be able to be a successful author and sustain myself doing that? And through getting rid of some of these things like the mirror, the window, and the wall, I was able to do that and able to pursue that minus the fear.
So what would you advise? What's the first step to finding the true self then?
Well, the first, I suppose the first step is to realize that what I'm doing is not my authentic self. Just to see, to see yourself, that when I look in the mirror, what I see is a reflection, a lot of what other people have placed on me. So I may see failure. I may see somebody this isn't going to work out. I'm a failure. My relationship is a problem. I've got all these secrets in my life that I'm presenting myself as one person, but in reality, I'm living a different life. Just to realize that you do have this mirror that you look in that's distorted, that we do put up a window, try to control what other people think about ourselves, and that we do build walls. Just that small realization that, okay, that somehow resonates as the truth with me. I think maybe there's that. And then, of course, as the author of this book, I'd recommend that you buy the book and go through and do these exercises if that resonates with you.
What are your main goals as an author?
My main goal is to help to bring about a coming together time. I suppose that's the overarching big goal, is to try to have people from various different backgrounds and different experiences, and to see that really we are all the same, and we can set aside some of these rivalries that we have and meet on a common ground of, we all want to be loved. We all want to love somebody. We all want to be loved. We all want to have friends. We all want to feel comfortable in our own skin, those kind of things. So that's the overarching one. On a much more personal level, my view as an author, when I write these books, I try to think about the individual person that's reading the book, and what is it that resonates, that's going to resonate with them, that would be a life-changing thought or idea.
So let me ask you this. How can the application of spiritual principles help readers find solutions to the problems in their lives? And what practical application do spiritual principles have for today's social justice movements?
Well, in today's social justice movements, and that's a very broad term, but it's one that I use myself, and I don't think we probably have time to really break down all of those. But people, I think, generally know the things that we battle with. That, and this goes probably much more to the things I wrote about in my book, Darko, which is about a Joan of Arc-like figure that's born in today's world. But the real answer to this is, one of the things that I say is that we can change the king, but unless the kingdom changes, it doesn't make a difference. So we just went from one president that a lot of people liked to a president that a few more people liked, and it was a very close election and very decisive. But have things really changed for the better? We changed the king, so it's the kingdom, the people within that have to change. And so I've said for a long time that the help to these many of these social justice movements is not coming from the top. Wage equity and fairness and racism and some of these issues, the xenophobia, these issues. The help from that is not coming from the top down. It has to be from the spiritual. It has to be a groundswell from the bottom up. That we, the people, have to change. We can't expect the government to make these kind of changes.
No. Well, we're coming to a close in this particular chat with you, Kenny, but there's a couple more questions I'd like to ask you, so let's keep them brief. But
please.
Who are your most influential spiritual mentors and guides?
Well, I'm sitting here in a room where I do my meditation every day, and I've got on the wall, I've got a picture of Mother Teresa, I've got a picture of Joan of Arc, I've got a picture of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. And
you got them all.
I do, and so those are, people who have sacrificed their lives, and given everything in order to bring about these social justice changes. And when you look at what's common among those people, is that they were spiritual people that, like Martin Luther King Jr. first was a preacher, and then he was a civil rights person. Mother Teresa was a nun first, and then she was dignity in dying, and that everybody should be loved at the end of their lives. So there you go.
As an author, then, are you inspired by the works of any other writers?
Well, quite a few. Yeah, there's writers that I really love. One is a guy named Emmett Fox, who wrote in the 1930s. He was a pretty metaphysical writer. Some of the writers of today that I really like. I'm pretty particular to a guy named Anthony DeMello. He's passed on now, but he was a Catholic priest, but he had this, his book Awareness was really influential in me, and many others. But
yeah, it's probably not a good question at the end of a show. You could go on for a little while on that one, couldn't you?
I have so many books, and so many of them have touched my soul.
Well, your dedication, there's no doubt about it, your dedication to helping others grow is obvious, and you share your own journey very freely. What areas of help or insight do you think that, in closing, that you can offer to others?
Well, I would say, what areas help. I think I'd ask people to pick up one of these books, and this Mirror Window in the Wall is an easy one to start with. That's helpful. But just, work at trying to find this realization that just ask that simple question, am I one of these people that has to find a spiritual way of life, or else? And I'm going to suffer misery and depression if I don't. And I will continue to have these problems in my life that don't seem fair, but possibly there's an answer that doesn't have to be overly religious or overly controlling, that we can find a path that's comfortable for us.
One last question, Kenny.
Yes, sir.
Who is Darlene Markowitz?
We could spend a whole segment on that. But Darlene was a woman that I helped, and she had HIV when that was a death sentence, and she passed away, from AIDS. She got full-blown AIDS and died. And my wife and I became very close. She was family to us, and when she passed away, we adopted her son. And her son is now 35 years old, and he calls me his father and has for many, many years now. And he is absolutely 100% my son. So, but she went on to help many, many, many people, because knowing that she was likely going to die every day was precious to her, and she didn't have a minute to waste. And she taught us all tremendously powerful lessons.
Where can I buy the book?
The book can be found any of the online retailers, whether it's Ingram Spark or Amazon or Barnes and Noble. You could find the book at any of the online retailers, and you can do a search for author Kenny Down, and a lot of stuff will come up, including where to find the book. And you can visit my website, which is newthoughtlife.org, and read a lot more. I've got poetry and blogs and videos and stuff on there.
Can you actually order the book from there as well, from your own site?
Yes, you can click on there and it'll take you right to where you can get the book.
New Thought Life, folks. www.newthoughtlife.org. Not .com, it's .org. Don't get confused there. O-R-G.
That's right.
The book is titled The Mirror, the Window, and the Wall. And it's by Kenny G. Down, and it's very thought-provoking. I highly recommend it. I've read it. I think it's terrific. And I tell you what, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on Nothing Like a Good Book, Kenny. I appreciate the time you've given and wish you all the best in the world, that your good thoughts get out there to help so many others.
Well, thank you so much, Mark. It's a fantastic thing you're doing. You've got a wonderful show. Thanks for having me.
All right. You take care.
I sure will. Bye.